Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County.
Supervisors, it's now 7 o'clock. I call to order this meeting of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors on this Tuesday, on this Wednesday, February 17th. The first will be the honoring of the flag, followed by a moment of reflection by Supervisor Chris Hombook Boyle. And are you here, Chris?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't see your picture. You're here?
Yep, she
said yes.
Okay. See, Supervisor Bates has a flag. I have mine. All together, supervisors, I pledge allegiance
To
the flag
the
of the
United
States of America and
to
to
the
the republic for which it stands,
nation,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
justice.
and justice
for all.
justice for all.
It feels like herding cats. Thank you. Okay,
With a goat.
and a goat, an old goat, right? Okay. Supervisor Hombook Boyle.
Thank you. My reflection.
Supervisors, mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. My reflection tonight is about public service. A public service is a service intended to serve all members of a community. It is usually provided by the government to people living within its jurisdiction, either directly through the public sector or by financing provision of services. The term is associated with a social consensus, usually expressed through democratic elections, that certain services should be available to all. Fire, police, armed services, public education, public health, public broadcasting come to mind, but the list is much longer. As county supervisors, we are democratically elected to provide a very high level of public service. As one of the newer members of the County Board of Supervisors, I want you all to know that I'm honored to do this public service with you. I have yet to be at a face-to-face meeting, but have appreciated the high level of participation and discussion we all do in making important decisions for the people we serve. You all have shared the commitment and civility needed to work together for the common good, which I am thankful for. So I end with a thank you to Chair Smyer and all the County Board Supervisors for my opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Ready to do roll call? All right. Supervisor Gibson?
Present.
McKinney?
Present.
Knight?
Here,
Pagonis?
Here.
Anton? Supervisor Anton? Book?
here,
Chilson? Supervisor Chilson? Stelgis?
Here.
Mowry?
here,
Coffee?
Here.
Henning?
Here.
Is it Ray Henning?
Yes.
And Colleen Bates? Russell?
Here.
Gatlin? I can see you, Judy. Smyer?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can. All right. Chair Smyer?
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Handbook Boyle?
Present.
Here. I saw you. Neiman?
Here.
Dunning?
Here.
Wilkie?
Here.
Anderson?
Present.
Beckfield?
Here.
Schneider?
Here.
Supervisor Schneider?
Here.
Okay. Larry? Did Robin get on? She was having some problems. We'll go back. see if she can get her on. DeLuca? Here. Jansen? Here. Schroffnagel?
Here.
Roberts?
Here.
Kronk?
Here.
Christofferson?
Present.
All right. So I believe Robin is on the line. I'll put her as present. I believe she can hear us. So that's 27 present, 2 absent.
Who are the 2 absent, Sue?
Okay. Supervisor Anton and Supervisor Chilson.
Is either one on? Okay. We have 27 present, Sue.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. We have quorum. Thank you very much. Next item is approval of the Journal of Proceedings from January the 19th and our special meeting on February the 2nd. I believe we can do these together. The chair will look for a motion to approve.
Schneider
Supervisor
moves.
Backfield.
Schneider moves, Beckfield seconds. Are there any changes, deletions, or corrections to either set of minutes? I hear none. We'll do this by voice vote. All those in favor of approval of the Journal of Proceedings from January the 19th and February the 2nd, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay. The chair rules that this is unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll now move to public comment. Before we do public comment, I have a comment. We have actually 2 groups of people wishing to make comment tonight. One group is commenting on the 7 Mile Creek landfill, and the other is commenting on File 105, which is the Town of Washington project. I want to inform the people here for File 105 that the developer has withdrawn the application. A little later in the meeting, we're going to empty the motion, which means it doesn't exist anymore. And that would mean that if and when the developer resubmits the application, it probably will be different from the one that's in front of us now. You have the right and you have the privilege to make your comment tonight if you wish. However, you may be commenting on something that will change in the relatively near future. So I'm just advising you, you have that right, that privilege, and I'm going to ask the clerk to go down the list of those speaking to 105 and ask if they wish to make comment, given the fact that the resolution or motion has been emptied. So however, you may have something that will change in the relatively near future. So I'm just advising.
Point of order, Chair Snyder, somebody on the telephone has not muted. That is what we're hearing.
Oh, okay.
So you can *6 if you're on the phone to mute.
Thank you.
*6 to come back.
We will come to you in due course. So I'm going to ask the clerk to go down the list and ask the people commenting on File 105 if they still wish to make a comment. Sue?
Okay. First name on the list, Michael O'Mara. Are you on the line? Mike O'Mara?
He is having some difficulty getting into the meeting. This is his son, Matt.
Okay, we'll come back if he can get on the line to him.
Yeah.
All right.
Try to get him the number.
Okay. All right, second person, Leslie Duffy.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Okay, you have 3 minutes. I will give you a 30-second warning when you get to 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay, thanks so much. My name is Leslie Duffy, and I live at 5440 Woodcrest Highlands Road. And you may have heard some of our neighbors' concerns with the Orchard Hills development in the Township of Washington. And I do know that they have taken the proposal off of the slate tonight. But I wanted to point out the serious shortcomings of the proposal, especially the wetland delineation. The wetland delineation establishes the existence of physical limits to the wetland area for the state and local regulations. And originally, this was not done very well. And so it was conducted during the fall and not during growing season or the wettest part of the year to accurately analyze this area. And part of where their construction was originally was in flood hazardous areas. So I just ask that even when they resubmit their proposal, that this is looked at and analyzed. And I know that some of you have already noticed that previously in the Planning and Development Committee. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Next on the list, we have Cynthia Hunt. Are you on the line?
Yes, I am. I really appreciate your time this evening. My name is Cynthia Hunt, and I live at 2125 Andrew Drive. And I do know that the development, the Orchard Hills development, the plan was pulled at this point. My concern has been about a lot of development that's been happening in the town of Washington very quickly, and there's been absolutely no change to our infrastructure. And, you know, Double I, the sight lines already are really dangerous at Mitchler and Cater Road. And our township doesn't seem to have any plan for changing that infrastructure to support any new developments down here. There's been accidents, and again, with the current rate of traffic, it's really bad. So any new developments, including this one, you know, look to add, if this one was going to add 1,200 vehicles a day, I have two new young drivers who are terrified to use Double I because it's not safe. And not only this, this proposal doesn't have, and I don't know if the developers are going to do it or not if they bring it back again, an actual independent traffic analysis. They took a snippet of time to look at the traffic on a day during the pandemic where traffic has been very low. No one's been going anywhere. So my concern is about this development as well as others, and that we get maybe another way of getting the developers or development groups to do some independent traffic analysis as well as their safety analysis, so that they're not just paying someone to give that information, because it may be biased in that way too. So I'm hoping that some of these, like this development, is one that everyone kind of gets people to take pause and think about looking at some of these more, and making sure the developers are doing their due diligence before they submit the plans to the county or before we look at rezoning as well. So again, I really appreciate the time speaking tonight, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, Drew Brandenburg. Are you on the line?
I am, yes. And also, thank you for your time this evening. You did mention the developers have pulled this application, and we are well aware. We have actually, the people speaking tonight, our group has been in communication with the developer in hopes of kind of finding some common ground and finding a way to allow this area to be developed, but in an appropriate way that fits with the geography, the infrastructure that we have, along with just, you know, the impact it would have environmentally on the water and the aquifer and the wildlife. And so we're trying to work with the developer. We wanted to make sure that the board was aware that this proposal got to almost to tonight, in spite of a lot of the shortcomings in the plan that Cynthia pointed out. We do want to speak to the high density. 1,200 trips a day for automobiles feels rather unsafe, and we want to make sure that our neighborhoods that exist, as well as those that use the roadways for biking and hiking and running, have safe places to be. Also would like to thank the Planning and Development Committee for hearing our concerns and voting this down last month, and ask that the board just kind of be aware of what the plan was, and hopefully the changes that are made that do deal with our concerns. So again, thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Matt O'Mara? Matt, are you on the line? Matt O'Mara?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sue. And a big thank you to this group for hearing us. What we're trying to do is be proactive in this. We know that it was pulled at this meeting, but we also are very well aware that this application is going to come back, whether it's next month or in May or April, and we're very involved with this. As you folks know, we live here, and when you live somewhere, it means more. And our group, we've made it very clear to the developers, and I think anyone else that'll listen, that we are not against development. We understand that this has to happen. We've talked to Paul and Craig, and we're very open about that. But one of the major concerns, along with what other people have said, is that it is done the right way. And I think the county and the city and its residents deserve it to be done the right way. And with this group, I'm very concerned that they are missing a whole bunch of things with their plans and with their due diligence. These guys also have other developments going. They have them going in Hudson, they have more going in Eau Claire. And I think because of that, they've just missed so many things. And I think that's why it's not here at the table tonight. And I commend you for voting it down because of the inaccuracies and the shoddy work that was put together. The biggest development in Eau Claire County needs to have a magnifying glass like none other. And I don't feel that that's happening. I live across from the county park. My father lives adjoining to us, and I've been here for 39 years. I've been here my whole life. And this isn't about not in my backyard. This is about safety, and this is about having a development that will work for the people that live there and the people that already live here. And I just think that, with this group of four, Craig is the only one that has real experience. Paul sold lumber at Lyman, and
30
the other
seconds.
guys, they have no experience. So, when you're borrowing a bunch of money from the banks and you've got debt on other properties, I just think that a full underwrite of the people that are making these major changes really needs to be looked at. And I do thank this group. You guys have been wonderful, and hopefully it's been mutual feeling with our group, and we look to continue the conversation. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is Mike O'Mara on the line now?
I'm on the line.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Mike O'Mara. I live at 5115 Mishler. I previously lived on Palomino Road. I've been here since 1977, 1979. My kids are raised here. One of them lives here, and my grandkids live here. I'm opposed to the housing density suggested by the withdrawn development. Hundreds, maybe even thousands of more vehicles maybe going back and forth to the city on the narrow streets going through the dense neighborhoods creates unsafe situation for the current residents. The dense housing development is environmental in the environmentally sensitive areas like the wetlands, the steep unbuildable slopes, and the unbuildable shale ridges is just asking for problems. I'm not against low density development, and there's a place for high density development. In fact, one is just coming through right now next to the Washington Town Hall, and that's a perfect place for it. High density, it's 100 yards or so from, short distance from main highway 93. There's plenty of land around those main highways, 37, 53, 93. The rural character of our township has been maintained in nearby developments like Hidden Valley and Thistledown, both good models for the development that Orchard Hills is contemplating. You may know over 250 people have signed petitions opposed to the development. I hope you listen to them as well. One last thing, when I lived on Palomino Drive in 1979, it was a new house that had a new septic system, and about in the third year, our septic system failed. That was in 1980, so there was no secondary site to put a septic system. I was lucky. I found a neighbor that would help me solve the problem. We bought a portion of his land, and we built another septic system. Luckily, I was able to afford it. Thank goodness. The Orchard Hills development is on similar land as my Palomino Drive property was. Those shale ridges go throughout this part of town of Washington. The extremely poor perks that are present in Orchard Hills and the high grounds, the wetlands, the steep slope. I got to ask you, what happens if the so-called community septic system fails? Like
30
mine
seconds.
did on Palomino Drive. Who will be able to afford rebuilding a community septic system? Who has that liability? Does the township? Does the county? Who will pay for that? With dense housing, there are no secondary locations for large community systems. As the largest development in the history of Eau Claire County moves forward, please consider modest housing density in order to maintain our rural character and safe streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the speakers that we had signed up on that.
Okay, let's go to the 7 Mile Creek speakers.
Okay. First speaker, Dennis Campbell. Are you on the line? Dennis,
Yes. Can you
go
hear me?
ahead. Yes, we can.
Yes. I'm Dennis Campbell. I live at 7655 Burnell Drive. I just wanted to say a few words about the expansion of the 7 Mile Creek landfill. As few people understand how huge this expansion is going to be. It's going to increase the present capacity by 40% while raising the height by 90 feet from where it is currently. I just want to say this is huge. Just imagine a 9-story building sitting on top of the present mountain of trash. And it's not just the footprint or the height that's increased, but it also increases the unsightly view, you know, the truck traffic, the nasty odors, dust, noise, and all the other litter. And as all aspects of this huge business increases, the property values of the landfill's neighbors decrease in direct proportion. Now this is it's an economic loss of thousands of, to maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to people's property. And it's real and it's happening now. Now the county, the city of Eau Claire, the township of Seymour have received host fees totaling millions of dollars since the private company took over the landfill. And at the same time, the neighbors around the landfill who are actually impacted socially and economically haven't received any protection. The landfill siting committee is currently in negotiations with the landfill owners. And I'm asking you, the county board, to urge the siting committee representatives to work for an equitable proposal for the 7 Mile Creek neighbors. And this includes all property owners within 1 mile of the landfill. And I thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Kathy Campbell.
Okay.
Go ahead. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm just getting a chair. Just a minute. Okay.
All right, go ahead.
All right. Kathy Campbell, 7655 Burnell Drive. The 7 Mile Creek neighborhood is facing an immediate and serious threat from the landfill expansion. This enormous expansion Dennis just detailed threatens our well-being, homes, and neighborhood. There's a lack of transparency and representation on the siting and standing committee. There hasn't been a meeting open to the public in over a year. We found discrepancies in the map determining the 1 mile radius provided to the committee by Eau Claire County. We want to be included in a process to resolve this. For nearly 2 years, our neighborhood has asked that the siting committee protect the entire 1 mile radius to mitigate adverse effects, provide annual compensation, and property value guarantees from the landfill operator, GFL. The majority of landfills in Wisconsin have these protections. However, the siting committee proposed limiting compensation and property values to just within 3/4 of a mile. This reduction would eliminate 31% of our property owners. The landfill is harmful to our entire neighborhood, not just 69% of it. Advanced Disposal offered property value guarantees to residents within 1 mile of the Wright County, Minnesota landfill in 2017. That expansion was denied by Wright County. As a result, GFL continues to ship waste from 9 Minnesota counties here, amounting to over 30% of the yearly tonnage. We're getting the Minnesota garbage, but not the same protection GFL would give a Minnesota resident. If GFL wants to continue to dump Minnesota garbage here, we need protection. The negative impact of the landfill on our property values is clear. In 2019, a banker told a potential buyer of a home nearly a mile from the landfill that the loan amount would have to be reduced by $50,000 or 15% because of its proximity to the landfill. It sold in 2020 for $50,000 less. Compare that with the approximate $200,000 the county collected in host fees from the landfill last year. The 1 mile property owners are paying the high cost of this landfill. In a recent petition, every respondent, all 110, agreed that the final agreement should include annual compensation and property value
30 seconds.
for all property owners within 1 mile radius of the landfill. The results in the petition are in your packet. The DNR says the landfill will never close. Sadly, our future and theirs are linked. Please direct the siting committee representatives to address our concerns in the final agreement with GFL. Our financial security and well-being depend upon it. Thank you for your help with this matter.
Thank you. We have about 9 minutes remaining. Is there anyone else online who wishes to present a comment? Is there anyone else online who wishes to present a comment? For the third and
We do
final.
have a chat from, Chair Mayor, a chat from Roxanne. Roxanne, you will need to unmute if you would like to speak.
Does the chat contain the comment, Samantha?
Say that again.
Does the chat contain the comment?
It does not. She just says she wants to speak.
Oh, okay.
I'll unmute her for her.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me? This is Roxanne.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. My name is Roxanne Bukowski. I live at 6605 Olson Drive. I'm one of the members of the 7 Mile Creek Neighborhood Association. And our property is right on the edge of the 1 mile boundary. So as Kathy said, our property with the current proposal would be excluded from the property value guarantees and sociological payments. Our property within 1 mile, even though it's not right next to the landfill, is still affected. A study from 2010 said that landfills decrease property values by 14%, and this impact diminishes, but only by 5.9% per mile. I'm reiterating Kathy Campbell's and Dennis's plea to the county board to please advocate to the siting committee that the current proposal is good and it's progress, but it's not good enough yet because it does not include everyone within the 7 Mile Creek Neighborhood Association and the properties within 1 mile of the landfill. Thank you, and I can give the rest of my time to Kathy Campbell if that's allowed.
No, we don't do it that way.
Okay, so no problems.
I will ask if there is anyone else who wishes to present comment. Anyone else? For the third time, anyone else? The public comment period is now closed. Thank you for your comments. The next item on our agenda is reports to the county board under 2.04.320, beginning with oral reports. We'll start with the pre-sale report for the 2021B and 2021C bond issues by Sean Lentz. Supervisor Pagonis, did you wish to preface any of this?
I thank you for asking, Chair Smyer. I don't know that it's necessary. It's basically, Sean will probably just explain that we're looking for 2 boroughs, and I think if there are any questions, I'm happy to help out.
Thank you. Sean, are you online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Samantha, should I share my screen, or can you put up the 4 exhibits for the board members?
I can bring them up if it's easiest.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask if Supervisor Schneider has received this material?
I did.
Good, thank you.
Hey, so did Supervisor Leary, who's on the phone. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sean.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Samantha, is it up at this point? I'm not seeing it on my screen, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
Yep, it's on its way.
Okay. Well, just as we're waiting for that to come up, as Stella had mentioned, we've been working with the Finance Committee on putting together a plan for financing the county's regularly scheduled capital improvement projects. And this year, you do have the extraordinary financing related to the highway facility bonds. The committee looked at a number of different options regarding the repayment of particularly the highway facility bonds. And after looking at it in the context of existing indebtedness that the county already has, as well as some preliminary long-term planning that county staff is continually looking at and reviewing, we bring forward to you the plan of finance for the highway facility and again, the 2021 capital projects. Exhibit 1, which I now see on the screen, is the proposed 20-year repayment of the highway facility bond issue. This planning document, Exhibit 1, uses interest rates that are approximately 0.5% above current market, might even be a titch more than that at this point, to repay the borrowing for the highway facility bonds over the maximum allowed under state law 20-year period. The decision of the committee for recommendation this evening is to pay the bonds back over what we call a level principal and interest basis, or a level payment basis, very similar to the way you would pay your mortgage payment on your home, where you have the same monthly payment unless you choose to pay more. This issue, the preliminary plan annual payment will add about 1.5 million additional debt service over the next 20 years to the county's debt levy in total. And you'll notice the interest rates, as I mentioned, are conservative under current market conditions. Historically speaking, interest rates are at a very, very low point. So while a project of this magnitude is never an easy project to put together and have to finance, the county is hitting the market at a very, very good time to be issuing long-term debt. I had the pleasure of working with your neighbors to the north, Barron County, on a very similar facility that they're working on, and the interest rate that they received, comparable to what you see here, the true interest cost rate, TIC rate, was at about 1.5 to 1.6%. So hopefully, if market holds, we can look forward to interest rates in that range. Again, for planning purposes, we're a little conservative here, but overall the market is very attractive. Samantha, if you could go to Exhibit 2. Thank you very much. The second exhibit will look very familiar to many of the county board members. This is the normal financing for the capital improvement plans projects that were in your budget from this last fall. These projects, the county has typically financed over a 10-year period, with some of the projects with a shorter useful life being paid back over a 5-year period. And that very similar approach is being used this year. The amount of the financing in approximately 7.4 million is down a little bit from past years where we were closer to the 10 million mark annually. And I think part of that is a function of more and more of the highway projects able to be financed by your wheel fees that you have as well. Samantha, if we go to the next exhibit. Great. The last two exhibits are really to update the county board on the overall impact of the two issues that we're looking at this year. This exhibit is an exhibit looking at the borrowing capacity of the county. The county's borrowing capacity is limited to 5% of the equalized value of the entire county. That number leaves your borrowing capacity at almost 500 million. With this issue, for the highway facility as well as for the 2021 capital projects, you'll be at about 114 million outstanding. So you're well below your limit. It's really not a concern for the county, but we like to update the board on that just because the state does put that limit on the county's ability to use general obligation borrowing. And Samantha, if we could go to Exhibit 4. Now, Exhibit 4 is probably the exhibit that's of the most interest to the entire group, is what will be the impact of the new debt, the highway facility, as well as the 10-year promissory notes on the total county debt levy. The blue bars that you see on Exhibit 4 are the existing indebtedness, principal and interest payments that the county has currently for all of the debt outstanding. So for this year, in 2021, the payments are about somewhere around 12,600,000. The next 2 years in the blue bars, 22 and 23, about approximately the same payments. And then starting in 24 and thereafter, you'll see there's a gradual decline in the debt payments that the county has already authorized in past years. What you see then starting in 2022 through 2041 is the addition of the green bar, which is for the 2021 capital project borrowing, and the purple bars, which are for the highway facility bond issue, which is a really what I would call a major project, an extraordinary project, or a legacy project of the county, because these are certainly not projects that come along every day. I think the useful life of a facility like this is hopefully going to be in the 50-year plus range. With the new debt being added, we're expecting the total indebtedness, the total debt levy for the county to be approximately 15 million in 2022 and 23, and then thereafter in 24 going forward through 2041, you'll see there's a gradual decline. And I'm sure Norb could comment on this if he's available, but in some of the preliminary planning, future debt issues after this highway facility are expected to be in line with the capital projects borrowing of the 7 million plus this year, maybe even lower in future years. So I think as we start getting out toward the end of the 2020s, and certainly into the 2030s, I think there's a good possibility. Well, future is always never known for sure, that we could see the total indebtedness or total county levy, hopefully declining debt levy in future years. So for this evening, Mr. Chairman, what's the action needed by the county board is approval of the initial resolutions, one for the highway facility bond and one for the promissory notes. But before moving forward on that, if there's any questions of the county board that I can be helpful with, be happy to do that.
I'm scanning.
Chairman
for,
Farr, this is Supervisor Pagonis. I have a comment on that last
go ahead.
that last exhibit 4. I don't want this to be misleading. The way it appears to be dropping off very precipitously. This is under the assumption that we would not be continuing the annual borrowing, and that's not very likely. So while the exhibit paints an attractive picture, it's not a realistic one. And what the key word that Sean used is the already authorized debt. So what this would be, the green and the purple bars not yet authorized, but the blue bars is what's currently authorized. So it's unlikely we would not be having that annual borrowing. So I didn't mean to step on Sean's toes, but I just want to make sure it's clear to the supervisors. It looks like a great chart, but it's not a realistic one.
Thank you. I'm scanning for hands raised. We'll see if we can manage it that way. I see no hands raised. Are there any non-technical persons who don't wish to raise a hand but wish to make a comment? Go ahead. Anyone? I guess not.
Well, then I'm going to take the opportunity to just reiterate.
Somehow I knew you would do that.
Thank you. I just want to take the opportunity to reiterate the reason why we're moving forward with the highway building. There is a double reason. One is because interest rates are very favorable, and so we can get this done just with very favorable interest rates. And secondly, the existing building, and we'll discuss this later in the meeting, but we've been throwing money at it for repairs. The roof is leaking, and it's just all kinds of things going on with the building that needs to be fixed. And as one supervisor said, it's just throwing money at something that just doesn't make any sense. It's like throwing dollars down the ditch. So we don't want to do that. And the city of Altoona is prepared to take the highway building off our hands. They're going to buy it. So, just moving forward at this time seemed like a good idea. And unless anybody has any questions, I don't think I have anything more to say on that.
Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you mentioned that we would be selling the existing highway building. With those funds, would we use that to pay down the debt faster?
I don't have an answer to that, and I don't know when that sale would be made. I think John Johnson might know, or Supervisor Henning might know. I believe the city of Altoona offered $1 million for the lot. It's contaminated. They'd have to knock it down. Administrator Schaaf probably has a better idea.
Administrator Schaaf.
Thank you. Yes. So the county is currently in negotiations with the city of Altoona for the purchase of that building, as Supervisor Pagonis indicated. And we would be coming back to the board with a resolution through Committee on Administration and Finance and Budget as to the approval of that sale document. And then at that time, that resolution would stipulate how you, the board, would like to have the funds used based on the finance and budget recommendation. And I think that one of the things that is being contemplated is that the money from that sale would actually be used to actually help offset the cost of the project. So it wouldn't bring the money or the bonding down or change the amount of bonding. It would simply add dollars to the project because the project has not only the highway shop, but our potential Meals on Wheels kitchen, as well as our EOC and the multi-purpose room. So that would be the thought at this point. The board will vote on that in the future.
Supervisor Henning or Commissioner Johnson, did you wish to comment?
Mr. Chair?
Schneider with a question eventually.
Who was that speaking just now? Bates? No.
Schneider with a question
No,
eventually.
other than Schneider.
DeLuca has 2 more questions.
Okay, briefly, please. Go ahead.
Okay, so currently connected to that Altoona land is the tower easement. What happens to that? And also, did we consider taking the extra 2020 funds to drop the amount we had to borrow versus doing other projects like communication, etc.?
Chair Snyder, this is Tim Sullivan. If I could maybe respond to those.
Before you do that, Tim, there's background noise from somewhere. I can't tell where it's from, but
that's actually from when somebody speaks. It's from Tim. So when he's not speaking, he'll mute.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
So with regards, first of all, to the issue of the price, this property is currently being appraised. We had it appraised several years ago. We're updating that appraisal. That will be presented to the city of Altoona, and then we will negotiate a price. So Supervisor Pagonis indicated $1 million. That may be the price, but we don't know for sure yet if that in fact is going to be the price. Second of all, with regards to the tower that is there is a permanent and perpetual easement on that tower. So if the city does purchase the land, they purchase it subject to that easement. The tower would remain there.
Your second question, Supervisor DeLuca, briefly, please.
My other question was, did we consider taking that 549,000 and put it toward our borrowing so we don't have to borrow so much versus using it for communication, etc.?
Chair Smyer, that's going to come up later on the agenda.
Okay.
And just for Supervisor DeLuca's information, it is borrowed money. It's since it were already borrowed in 2020, but we can address that when it comes up on the agenda.
Thank you, Supervisor Pagonis. Supervisor Schneider.
Maybe this will be covered later, but is the borrowing the kind that we can pay it off earlier if we want to or not?
Supervisor Pagonis.
Well, I think Sean is probably better to answer that, but we have refunded all of our debt pretty aggressively in the last, I'd say, year or so, and I'm pretty confident that if a miracle occurred and the banks were paying us, I think we would probably take advantage of that refunding. The interest rates are so low, though, it might be unlikely that would occur.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chairman, real quick, there is going to be a prepayment date on the 20-year bond that would be in the 8th year of the 20 years. And on the 10-year issue, it'll be in the 6th year of the 20 years. So there will be an opportunity should, as Stella said, lower rates become available for refinancing.
Thank you, Sean. Okay. The next oral report is 2020 General Fund projection. Director Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Samantha, could you bring up pages 10 and 11 in the agenda packet, please?
Sure, just give me 1 second.
Sure. While she's doing that, we're going to be speaking to 2 reports this evening. I've reviewed these reports on the 2020 projection data with a couple of committees already, and I wanted to make sure that the entire board was up to speed and informed of what our most recent projections are for 2020. So that's the reason for including it in the agenda this evening.
I think also that it contains good news.
Yeah, that as well.
Good news.
Always better to present good news, yeah. So the first report is really to provide a little bit of context of, where have we come from during this year of uncertainty, and it's detailing when we've done these various projections throughout the year, which I have presented to the board at various occasions. And we have, on a number of occasions, gone to departments and asked for best case, worst case scenarios, and then looked at what kind of the median estimate would be of those estimates. And you'll see that when we first started out in April, we were very concerned. We looked to be at best case break even, worst case a $3.5 million deficit. Things got better in June. When July came along, we, as part of the budget process, the typical budget process, asked for a projection. That's why there's not a best and worst case. There's only the estimate that would have been rolled up from the departments. And then in September, again, we fell back a little bit, if you will. The thing to look at as you're looking at these is the spread. So it's not just the best case and worst case, but how large that spread is. So, we're looking at spreads that started off in April, 3.5 million, went to over 5 million in June. In September, they were back to about 3.7 million. And then in November, we took a considerably better approach, I guess, if you will, in our best case scenario. And that's when we started to really see some better data, more promising data, if you will, from not only some of the departments, but also what we were thinking in terms of sales tax projections and other things that were starting to potentially trend in a more favorable direction. But you can see even in our November projection, we still had roughly a $4 million spread of potential outcomes with a median that was about break even. I wanted to point the November one out because it was the first time that we actually had the potential for a best case scenario of about $2.1 million in surplus. I say that because now as I come to you and talk about where we're at in January, we'll talk about detail in a minute in the next slide, but we're saying about $2.2 million surplus right now. So I say that because it's very good news. It isn't a complete surprise in that we did have a best case scenario in November, certainly not prior to that. But I think it's just indicative of the very much uncertainty that we had throughout 2020. And you can see that while we've done this a number of times and things have shifted, there has been that uncertainty that existed, up until even the November projection that we did. So as we go into the next slide and we'll talk about the January projection, I'll still caution to the board, as I've cautioned the committees, it's early. It's early in the projections, if you will, in terms of 2020. Most departments typically close their activity at the end of February. Those departments that have grant revenue, specific grant revenue, are held open till the end of March. And then ADRC and DHS are actually open technically until June. Now, ADRC doesn't really impact this particular general fund because this is a general fund projection. DHS would, to the extent that they would at the end of the year have a different projection of a deficit other than what's included in this estimate. But we're not through February yet. So once we get through February and we close the activity of February that's related to 2020, we will once again go back and take a look at what our projections look like. But this projection, if you look at the very top section, the projection of the estimated department activity would be a surplus of a little over $2.5 million. As part of the 21 budget, $310,000 of that was assigned as part of the budget. So if we take that into account, then the net increase, if you will, to the general fund unassigned balance would be $2.2 million, which would be 22.8% increase in our general fund unassigned balance, which is a tremendous improvement. And it's coming at a very good time as we just were talking about getting ready to start our process for the two notes that we're talking about, the two borrowings, we will be meeting with the rating agency. That will be a requirement, and we were going to be doing that in early March. And one of the things that the rating agency has pointed out to us in past meetings is some concern about our decline in our general fund balance. So I think we'll be able to show them this most recent projection because we don't have any other data. And I think that will also be favorable for us in terms of being able to hopefully continue with our good bond rating. As far as the department activity, we definitely saw the contributions to the 2020 results that resulted from expenditure management by departments. Certainly the positions on the bridge plan, the mandatory and voluntary furloughs that we had, as well as the suspension of the step increase that we'll be talking about later in a resolution. And then certainly last but not least is a continued improvement in our projections for our sales tax collections. I think that's been one of the ones that we certainly started off the beginning of the year with certainly some concern over the impact of the sales tax collections, and we've been pleasantly surprised by that, as many counties in Wisconsin have been. So I think all those factors are contributing to what we're seeing here. I think there are some other factors that we're seeing in some departments as well when you look at it at a department level. So departments like the Sheriff's Department is certainly seeing savings in personnel, but they're seeing savings in overtime as well. Parks and Forest is projecting strong timber sales. The Register of Deeds has had a lot of activity related to refinancing, if you will, and fees that they get from filings related to refinancing. So there are other things that we've seen some benefits from. Certainly we've seen some offsets that the treasurer is not able to get the interest income that we were planning, because as we said, as borrowing rates go down, so do rates that are being paid on investments. The one I'd like to point out in terms of the departments is the non-departmental. You'll see that projection is $653,000 surplus. About $300,000 of that is related to a TID distribution that we received that we were not planning on. So that was certainly good news. And then there's a few $100,000 in that non-departmental that is related to the CARES funding that we received, particularly related to labor that had been reassigned to the Emergency Operations Center activity. And so we were able to claim and get reimbursement for some of that labor, and that's where some of those dollars. So overall, you'd see most departments are looking at the end of January at projecting a surplus. And at this point in time, I'm not aware of any major shifts from what these projections are. I mean, nothing has surfaced so far. Of course, we have to go through the audit process, and there will unlikely be adjustments as we go through the audit process that we'll find and need to make. But right now, I'm not aware of anything that would be what I will, I guess, say is a major change from what we're seeing in these projections.
Thank you, Norm. I'm monitoring hands raised. Are there any questions? Comments? I see none. Go ahead. Norm, did you have more?
No, that's it. Thank you, Chair Smyer.
Okay.
Schneider with a question.
Supervisor Schneider.
You hear on the news that a lot of cities and counties are needing and wanting more federal funds and saying they're going to be underwater if they don't get them. How come, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, but how come we're looking so good?
Well, I guess I would say one thing is I think we took aggressive approach to management of expenditures, putting together the bridge plan, the furloughs, the step increase, all those things were certainly very proactive steps that we took that, again, we saw results from. Again, I'm not saying that everyone is in the same situation we are with sales tax. I think we're going to be fortunate. I think we're going to come in very likely around budget, if not even a little bit better than budget. We had some really strong January and February collections that were enough to really hold us up for the year, if you will. I'm not so sure that everyone, had that same thing. We did certainly see reductions in fines and forfeitures and some other things, but as I said, we were able to get other things to offset them, like the TID distribution that we weren't planning, and stronger timber sales in other areas. So we've been fortunate to, when we've had things that have gone the wrong direction, had things that fortunately went the other direction to help mitigate them.
We don't have to pay CARES back, do we?
We do not. And we actually had extra CARES funds allocation that we didn't use, that we allocated or redistributed to the city to offset some of the additional costs that the health department was seeing above and beyond what they were able to get reimbursed for.
Thank you. Supervisor Beckfield.
Yes, thank you. Norm, my question, I don't know if you can answer right now or not, but our current fund balance would be at what if this all occurs?
That would have been at the very top of the report. It was like $12.7 million is what we would estimate the unassigned general fund balance to be at the end of 2020 if all those projections hold.
Okay, so that's if this money is there, that's already figured in that number, right?
That's right. Yeah, the top section of that second report,
yep.
If it all came true, we'd be at 12.7 million, which would be up $2.2 million from where it ended 2019, or up, more than 22%.
Great answer. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments? I see no hands raised and I hear no voices. Thank you very much, Norm.
Yeah, thank you.
The next item is Communicable Disease Task Force update by your chair. You may recall that last fall, the county board and the city council called for a task force to examine or to create a set of ordinances, city-county ordinance, regarding communicable disease. Now, this is not focused on just COVID-19. This is a broader and larger scope for this ordinance. And pursuing that, I joined with Terry Weld and with Mary Price, the chair of the City County Health Department Board, to create the task force, which took quite a bit of time because we were trying to be very careful to have representation across the board of persons with knowledge of public health law, the community, the business sector. And we did finally, after many weeks of working on this, and by the way, I will mention I'm very pleased with the cooperation and the collaboration of the three entities for this. We did a lot of hard work, and we didn't think of it in terms of members of the collaborative task force representing one or the other. And that's what made it so difficult to compose the task force. But we finally wound up with our 20 members. This was about 3.5 weeks ago. Our next task was locating and engaging a facilitator, because with such a large task force, we thought it would be necessary to engage a facilitator who has knowledge and experience in facilitation, and at the same time, some knowledge about public health law, community, and so on. And I think, as you know from a press release that we sent, Mr. Dan Steer has been engaged as our facilitator. We also, the three of us, made a determination that we also needed to have what we'll call a group of advisors. I call them flies on the wall, people who would be present for these meetings and provide input or answer questions or make suggestions. And that would be representatives of city and county and Public Health Board. They are not members of the task force, they're advisory. So having done all that, we're now in the process of trying to do a doodle poll to pull together the first meeting. We're having a little bit of problem with that because some of the members of the task force are apparently dragging their heels a bit. So that's in process. We're trying to bring together the first meeting sometime in the next 2 weeks if we can. The pattern is going to be 2 meetings of the task force followed by a listening session. The listening session is the equivalent of the public comment activity that we do on this board, but it will be an interactive process, open to the general public, and intended to receive comments and suggestions and so on regarding the work of the task force. We expect the pattern to be 2 meetings of the task force, a meeting of the listening session. 2 meetings of the task force, a meeting of the listening session. Right now, we're hoping that we can finish the job prior to August 30th and be prepared to bring the proposed ordinance before City Council and County Board at that time. And the objective is, again, to have essentially the identical ordinance for each entity, the city and the county. I think that's it. Anyone else? Anyone have questions or comment?
Nick,
Chair
I
Schmeier-
do.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, who was the first?
Tammy Shrapnagel.
Supervisor Schraffnagel.
I'm just sort of curious. I've heard lots and lots of names bantered about. What kind of quantity of task force applicants did we have?
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it wasn't as if people were standing at the door applying. We had to reach out to most of the members. There were a few who stepped forward. So it really was not a process of competition. It was a process of shanghaiing people and convincing them to come onto the board on the basis of recommendations made and so on. So I hope I answered your question. There was no real sifting process in terms of competition.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Supervisor Coffey.
Thank you. My question is, we've had some contention and differences about communicable diseases and how we should move forward. So my question is that as you work through this process and then have public input time, how will you get the process of the committee to the public? What plan do you have to let them know how far you are and what you're thinking?
Well, we're working specifically on communication plan right now, but I think the intention is to take the minutes of each meeting and make them available to the public and set some parameters for the listening sessions that would encourage that kind of input. And as you know, it's very difficult because members of the community would have to be interested in and able to and willing to look at those materials. So
Right.
we're working on that specific question now, but I think it will take the shape that I just mentioned.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other comment or question? Okay, well, stay tuned because we will give you updates as we go along. As I said, we hope to have the first meeting sometime in the next 2 weeks, depending on response to the doodle poll. So thank you for your attention. Next on our agenda is open record request to County Board Supervisors. Our Corp Counsel will make a presentation. Tim?
Thank you, Chair Schmeier. And before I begin, Chair Schmeier did ask me to comment about recent events that many of you may have received. And what I'm talking about is a communication that came from a law group last week after the passage of the mask mandate at the last meeting. I think it was the last meeting, that threatened that there would be civil or criminal prosecution for your action in passing that mask mandate. The reason I need to comment about that is because I need to let you know
that first of all, that was reviewed by the sheriff, and many of you are probably aware that he did issue a public press release indicating that he was not going to be commencing an investigation into criminal matters with regards to passing the mask ordinance. The other thing is what you need to also be aware of is that under the law, and specifically the constitutions of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin, there's a theory called legislative immunity. And what that means is that legislative bodies, and through case law, this has been extended to local governing bodies. When they're considering the passage of laws, they're immune from civil or criminal prosecution. And so the fact that you pass the mask ordinance, whether or not it's in the opinion of one group or another that it may or may not be constitutional or violate the law, with regards to those individuals who serve on that legislative body, they're immune from civil or criminal prosecution as a result of those constitutional provisions. And if you think about that, and I'll take you back to your civics class back in high school, how do we challenge laws when they're passed that are unconstitutional? We do that through the court system. It's part of our checks and balances within our system of government. If someone is aggrieved by the law, meaning that they suffer some wrongdoing or they suffer something as a result of the passage of a law, they have a right to challenge that in court. In this instance, for example, if somebody received a citation, they would have the ability to say, hey, I don't think this law is constitutional, and challenge it in court. At that time, the court could take that issue up and then decide whether or not it is or is not constitutional. You have to also think, too, that at this point, our law is not even in effect. So until someone is aggrieved by the law, it can't be challenged. Second of all, if it never goes into effect because maybe the state mandate remains in effect through the end of June, then it would never be challenged by anyone because we would not be able to issue any citations under it. So the point being here is that at this point, if you're concerned about being sued or having criminal investigation, I think that those concerns are very low. If practically, you shouldn't worry about them at this point. There is protection for legislative bodies under the law for passages of ordinances, and just want to make sure you're aware of that. With regards to responding to that email, I think that the sheriff, through his press release, did respond to that email. I can't tell you whether you should or shouldn't. If you were to ask me for advice, I would just say no, not to respond to it. So those are my comments about that, and that was at the request of Chair Smyer. My purpose here tonight, though, is to talk about public records. I was asked to give a quick overview on public records, and I do have a short PowerPoint presentation. I want you to know that this is really just excerpts of some of the statutes with regards to public records. It is not all-inclusive of all public records law. There are many instances where a public records law, my opinion or opinions of the Attorney General or whoever is reviewing the question, is going to be dependent upon the facts and also going to be dependent upon the law. We don't have every situation anticipated tonight. I'm just, again, giving you a very quick overview. So if you want to go to the next slide, please, Sam. The first slide here is an excerpt from section 1931 of the statutes. And essentially, public record law goes from about 1931, section 1931 through about 1937 of the statutes. This is really a declaration of the policy of the state of Wisconsin with regards to public records and public government. And as you see on the bottom where I've highlighted, there's a presumption of complete public access consistent with the conduct of government business. The denial of public access generally is contrary to the public interest, and only in an exceptional case may access be denied. Now, you need to know that there are instances where access is going to be denied because there may be another law that makes information confidential. There are times that may be denied based on the facts or based on the law. And if you have any question about those, that's a function of my office. You certainly would contact us and we would give you an opinion on that and help draft a response. Next slide, please. Who's subject to the law? Essentially, under the law, the authority is subject to law, and that's why we have 1932. It says 932, but it's really 19.32. And an authority is any of the following who has the custody of a record: the state, local office, an elective official, agency, board, commission, committee, council, department, or public body, corporate and public created by the Constitution, or a politic created by the Constitution, or by any law, ordinance, rule, or order. So basically, if it's a governmental body, if it's a committee or an agent or a group that's organized by the government, it's going to be subject to the public records law. And that includes elected officials. If you receive a public records request for documents and records that you have as a result of your functioning as a county board supervisor, they are subject to the public records law. Next slide, please. A record. This is a definite definition of what is a record. And a record is the obvious thing: paper, documents, but it also includes electromagnetic information, electronically generated or stored data. It could include recordings, photographs, films, tapes, optical discs, or any other medium on which electronically generated or stored data is recorded or preserved. So emails, if you have voice recordings or recordings of meetings, that might be a public record. Photographs, films, obviously, and obviously documents. Record also defines what is not a document or what is not a record. So drafts, notes, preliminary computations for personal use, personal documents that are not for governmental purposes, personal property of the custodian, have no relation to his or her office, materials to which access is limited by copyright, patent, or bequest, or published materials in the possessions of an authority. So, for example, you can't call up, I want to purchase such and such book. I can't call up the library and say, hey, I'd like you to make me a copy of that book and get it for reduced cost or free, because that's not necessarily a public record. It's a published material. But any other thing that you use as part of your working through your representation of the county is very likely going to be a public record. And so that includes, again, emails. Text messages are another thing that oftentimes are requested with regards to public records requests. Next slide, please. Who's a requester? It's anyone who requests inspection of copies of a record, except for a committed or incarcerated person, unless that person is requesting information about their own records. So essentially any person, doesn't matter where they're from or why they're requesting it, can request records under the law. There is not a requirement that you be a resident of Eau Claire County. You don't have to state a reason why you're requesting the record. It's just any person can request those records. Next, please. Who's the legal custodian? The legal custodian is the person who is responsible for responding to the records request. And typically, if I think in terms of the county and the departments, typically the legal custodian of each department is oftentimes the department head, because they're in charge of the records of their department. An elected official is the legal custodian of his or her own records, but the official may designate an employee of his or her staff to act as a legal custodian. The chairperson of a committee of elected officials, or the designee of the chairperson, is the legal custodian of the records of the committee. So also, when there's a record request come in, it's the legal custodian or the custodian of the record who has to make the decision about releasing the record, and if there needs to be a response to the record request. They also need to be responsible for gathering the records, although, you know, sometimes if the records are maintained, oftentimes if they're maintained electronically, we do that with the assistance of the IS department. So, next slide, please. Access to records and fees. Again, any requester has a right to inspect any record, as long as it's not confidential, not otherwise protected by law. And if it is, we need to make a specific demonstration about why we're not releasing that record. And then the next slide, please. There is a requirement for requests under the law too, and it needs to be if it reasonably describes the requested record or the information requested. However, a request for a record without a reasonable limitation as to the subject matter or the length of time represented by a record does not constitute a sufficient request. A request may be made orally, but a request must be in writing before an action to enforce the request is commenced under 1937. Sometimes we get these huge public records requests, and it's not necessarily the size of the request that determines whether or not the request is sufficient or not. And this is backed up by case law. It really goes to this limitation as to subject matter and length of time represented by the record request. For example, a record request cannot request future information. I'm going to request all of your future county board meetings. Well, or meeting minutes. Those don't exist yet, so we can't provide them. We would deny that request. We can provide you the meeting minutes that exist up to this time, but anything that occurs in the future, we can't do it. It's not a sufficient request. Likewise, if the request is so burdensome because it requests so much information that we would be spending all of our time trying to figure out what the request means, we have a right to go back and say, hey, can you narrow this request? Or otherwise we may have to deny it because we can't determine what in fact this request is specifically meaning. The case law on this, and I'll give you the example of the two cases that often come up in the discussion about this. There's one case that comes out of, I believe it's out of Gamey County. And in that instance, an individual requested copies of 911 recordings for a 3-hour period during the night that he was arrested. Well, out of Gamey County has many multiples of telephone lines in their 911 service. And it would have amounted to about 180 hours worth of recordings that needed to be transcribed. And because it was not specific to a specific incident or a specific time period, the court said that request was overbroad and it was okay for the county to deny that request. That was obviously a large request because it would have taken a significant period of time to gather that information and then transcribe it and then provide it. But on the other hand, there's another case involving University of Wisconsin system where there was a request for information about applicants who had applied to the university, the professional schools, the medical school, the law school, over a period of time of a number of years. The information about, you know, what was the background, what was their standing in high school, that sort of thing. It was a huge request. And if you look at that, you would think, well, that's overbroad too. But in that instance, the court said, no, the request was specific enough to delineate the information that was being requested, that even though it was a very large request, it was not overbroad. And so, you know, those are the things that we need to look at when we get a request that comes in. Just because it's a big request doesn't necessarily mean that it's automatically going to be overbroad request. Next slide, please. Fees. This is under 1935 sub 3. we may impose a fee upon the requester for the actual and direct cost of reproduction and transcription of the record, unless a fee is otherwise specifically established or authorized to be established by law. So in some instances, if I go to the clerk of court's office, they have a copying fee established by law, that's what they charge. But otherwise, we would charge the actual cost of copying. Different jurisdictions set that rate differently based on what their copying costs are. Many of our copying costs at this time are negligible because they're requesting electronic records. So it would be a matter of putting it into an email, putting it on a thumb drive, and maybe providing it to the requester. There is also a fee that can be charged for locating the record. That location fee can't be charged necessarily if they come in and say in my office, they request some records and I have to locate a record. It takes a long time and it's going to cost more than $50. We can charge them the fee, but we would have to charge them a location record based on the salary of the lowest paid qualified person to locate that record. So it would not necessarily be on my salary, but maybe would be on the salary of a legal specialist within my office. And we can also request prepayment of a fee if the fee is going to be in excess of $5. Go ahead. Next slide, please. Time for compliance. Under the law, and this is 1936, any record which is specifically excuse me, I got the wrong one. 1935, sub 4, we shall, as soon as practicable and without delay, either fill the request or notify the requester of the authority's determination to deny the request in whole or in part, and the reasons therefore. So we need to act on those as soon as possible. If the request is made orally, we can deny the request orally. Unless there's a demand for written statement of the reasons denying the request. If it's in writing, we need to be responding in writing. If we deny a written request in whole or part, we also need to provide information to the requester under 1937 that they have a right to request a review by the Attorney General and or the District Attorney, and or the right to review by mandamus by filing an action with the Circuit Court or requesting that the DA or the Attorney General file mandamus action on their behalf to review whether or not, in fact, we should be releasing any records. I should also make a note here about destruction of records. There is not in the public records law specific provision about destruction of records, but we do have record retention laws, and we do have a record retention policy for Eau Claire County. And so you should know that if you destroy a record that is there, that may also bring about the ability to bring an action against the county or the legal custodian to avoid compliance with, if you're doing it specifically to avoid compliance with the public records law. So you don't want to be destroying records just to say that you don't have them. And then 1936, which is the next slide, limitations on release. So any record which is specifically exempted from disclosure by state or federal law or authorized to be exempted from disclosure is exempt from disclosure. So those records that are confidential under the law would not be disclosed. There are also things that we would not disclose in any event, certain law enforcement records. And when I say certain, generally once those law enforcement records, the charging has been done and the investigation is out in the open, oftentimes those are released. But during an investigation, we certainly would not release law enforcement investigation records. Computer programs and data. What a great way to get Microsoft's information by doing it through a public records request for the county. Those are things that we don't have to release and we would not release. Trade secrets, certain companies that we work with, we may have information about their trade secrets because of the services they're providing. We would not release that information. Building plans, I like this one under the statute. If you think about it, if I'm in jail and I request the building plans for the prison, what a great way to figure out how to get out. Those are exempt from being released under the public records law. In personnel records, you should know that personnel records, there is not a general exemption from personnel records. So, if you want to know how long I've worked for the county and what positions I've held while I'm in the county, you can request that from the HR department and they will tell you that. They'll tell you how much I got paid during the time that I was in the county, my salaries. But what they will not give out is my home address, my home phone number, my social security number, any personal identifying information. Those are specifically protected under the statute and should not ever be released. Yes.
We have a question. Do you want to take it now or save it?
Sure. I'm done, so go ahead. What's the question?
Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. One goes to the destruction of documents. I routinely throw my junk mail away. Is that a violation?
Well, again, going to junk mail or mail that's part of your work as a government employee. Junk mail, is it a public record? If I receive something in the mail that is not has anything to do with what you're doing as a county board supervisor, I don't think there's a problem with that. But if it's correspondence maybe between you and another supervisor talking about, legislation and the benefits or cons of that legislation, you want to keep that information.
Well, right, that's much more specific. But if I'm getting if I get things from Wisconsin Counties Association, can I just get rid of them as I read them?
That you're not going to have a problem with. You shouldn't have a problem.
So that's question one. Question two goes to identification and anonymity of the requester. You stated that if a person is incarcerated, we don't have to give them, we don't have to comply with the open meeting law. So my question is, if the individual is anonymous, we can't see them, we're getting a random email from an anonymous location. How do we know? How do we know that it's not some woman in Taikuda, for example? Some individual from Waupun.
Yeah, and you've asked me that question before, and I told you I don't know how you know that. Sometimes you're not going to know that, so we're going to have to assume that they're not, because we do have a responsibility to respond to the open records law. If we learn that that person is, then certainly we have a reason to say no. So. I know that's not an answer you want to hear, but that's the best I can give you at this point.
Supervisor Mowry, followed by Supervisor Wilkie.
Yes, I just had a couple questions. One is there seems to be some communication venues that were not part of the list. So if you have a phone conversation with someone, a county employee, and you don't record it, I assume that's not recoverable, or a chat during lunch or something like that, where you don't take notes, or
that's not a record.
Okay.
A phone conversation is not a record. Conversation between you and somebody else over lunch is not a record. A record is a document or a recording, electromagnetic document, email, or a text message or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Supervisor Wilkie, followed by Supervisor Dunning, followed by Supervisor Russell. Supervisor Wilkie.
Yes, Corp Counsel. Is staff performance evaluations and disciplinary actions and promotions a public record?
Technically, yes. But there is also provision under the law that if we receive a request for information about disciplinary history, for example, We would then provide, and it comes from the case, it's called Woznicki, that we would provide the employee notice that we've received the request, that they then have time under the law to respond to that by filing an injunction with circuit court. And it's their responsibility to do that. It's not our responsibility to do that. Generally, if they haven't done that within 10 days, then the record would be released.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Dunning.
In my case, I use my desktop as a placeholder of records so that when I'm on this meeting tonight, I can put some of the other records on my desktop, which means I have to transfer the email over to an email on my personal computer. Does that make my personal computer open to search?
Yes. That's why we advise, that's why you all have iPads or whatever they are.
Except that the iPad limits you to about 2 weeks of emails, and anything that's done in the previous 2 years is gone.
Some of that is stored through IS.
Oh, it's stored, but we don't have it for immediate use.
Yeah. But you need to understand too, that if you're using your personal devices and you're using it for public purpose and you're creating public documents, records, that potentially your personal device may be searchable for purposes of public records.
Even if it's a duplicate of the county record.
Well, we would have to determine that. You know, we'd have to see if there is that duplicate. We're not going to send 2 copies of it. We'll send 1.
And text messages, how do you account for those?
Well, first of all, my understanding is that none of the county supervisors have county-issued cell phones. So that would be our standard response, is that we don't have county text messages for supervisors. For example, with various departments, the Department of Human Services, the Sheriff's Department, they do have county-issued cell phones, and they do use those cell phones to conduct work. And so there are records that are created, and occasionally we do have to supply those text messages as part of records requests. Personal ones, you know, that may be, you know, like a conversation, but just be careful of it, I guess is what I'm saying. Is, you know, the easy way to prevent having a record is to have a conversation as opposed to doing a text. And I know that's not the way the world communicates anymore, but it certainly solves a lot of problems with regards to public records.
Supervisor Russell, followed by Supervisor Anderson. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a couple of questions. I was just wondering if we have any obligation to protect the contact information of the public that sends us an email, and they might add on their phone number or their home address. We'd be releasing that to someone we don't know. Do we have any obligation to protect that, or should a citizen know that if they send us an email, it has become a public record and that information is public?
There is information or language in the statute talking about personally identifiable information. And so typically we would try to prevent releasing personally identifiable information, but they also should know that if they are sending records or email to a public agency, that their email address very likely will become a public record.
Okay, and can a requester be from anywhere in the world then?
Yes.
They're not limited to United States or something. Okay. The other concern I had, since we didn't, this gets into another area, clicking on an attachment from an unknown sender is a good way to get malware into the network. I think that that's sort of a barrier to responding to requests too, right?
Well, if there's an attachment and you don't want to click on it, and certainly IS would tell you not to click on attachments from unknown senders. Without clicking on the attachment, and if you're able to respond, you just say, I'm not going to open this because I don't know who you are. And so I can't respond to your request based on this information or something like that.
Okay, so we aren't obligated to respond to them if it appears suspicious, we can't identify the sender?
Well, again, it depends on what the content is. If you're asking me, are you required to because it's a public records request, I have to see the email to see if they're specifically requesting public records. We get an awful lot of emails as public employees and as public officials where people are giving you their opinion, but they may not be requesting specific information. And so you need to also be careful about how you read these documents to determine whether, in fact, it is a public records request or not. And do you have to respond to everyone? That's up to you. I'm not going to tell you you shouldn't. I would certainly agree with IS that, if there's a link there and you don't know who the sender is, that you shouldn't click on it because it may download malware or some other virus into your system or into the county system. And if you have any question, you should be asking IS or asking my office, and we'll help you out with that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Supervisor Anderson.
Yes. Let's say that you are having a correspondence with someone about county business, let's say 2 board members, and it's on a social media platform, and the terms of service of that social media platform claims ownership of all communications made on that platform. Would you be able to, not you, but the communicator, say that is not mine to give, or would it have to be the platform that claims ownership?
Well, if you maintain a record of it on your device, that's what would be potentially a public record.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think I heard a voice. Is there someone else who wanted to
Schneider.
speak? Supervisor Schneider.
Are we supposed to keep all of the emails we get from citizens, or do we assume that the county IS has kept those?
The county does retain the
Okay.
email on behalf of the county board of supervisors. And so IS keeps county board supervisors' emails for the duration of the time that they're required to be retained.
Thank you.
So IS, you said, keeps them?
Yes, they do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other hands raised. And I would request now that those of you who did raise your hands, please take them down. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim.
You're welcome.
Next on our agenda, written reports from the Finance Department, 2020 Contingency Fund, 2021 Contingency Fund, and
Chair Smyer?
Administrator Schaaf, is that you?
Yes, sir, it is. I had just a few very brief updates. I will be
sorry.
very brief.
I'm sorry, my cross-eyed self skipped over that once again. Thank you.
Thank you. I will be very brief. A couple of things. We have received notice, and Wisconsin Counties is working with the state of Wisconsin. The Census Bureau has indicated that they will not have census data actually released to the states until September 30th of 2021. Typically, we would start to see the release of that data happening even around this time, like right around February 18th. And so this will delay the process significantly. Typically, the county would take the data to create supervisory districts. And at a meeting earlier this week where we spoke with the Wisconsin Counties Association, it was determined that based on the late data arrival, redistricting in 2021 is unlikely to occur. The Wisconsin Counties Association is working with the state legislature to identify solutions. It will likely take a change in the statutory language, which has hard stops for dates. And if anyone's interested, we can send out what would typically be the timeline for the redistricting process. Our folks in the county are working on preparing for that data and have continued to do that work. And so it's simply a matter of getting the final data. Again, that redistricting will likely occur in 2022, and we'll have to receive guidance on which elections will be affected and how they will be affected. The governor also has released his budget for the next biennium, and there are a number of points of interest for county government. The government is quite the governor's budget is quite expansive and has identified particularly a number of revenue sources that it's anticipated will be eliminated from that budget. As far as process, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau will prepare information about the proposed budget, and they will have that evaluation ready about 1 month from now. We already know that the Joint Finance Committee has indicated that they will likely begin their process from a base budget, meaning they will use the base from the prior year as their starting point versus the governor's budget. On the revenue side, there are a number of expansions in revenue, about $2 billion that it's anticipated the legislature will not retain. One is Medicaid expansion. One is an increase in corporate taxes, and another is a taxation on the legalization of recreational marijuana. And so there are a number of things that will be immediately carved out of the budget. There are some good news areas from a county perspective as it relates to agriculture, and also increases for the veterans grant that the county receives. There are a number of labor-related changes that are likely to be stricken immediately from the budget. And there are a number of increases in the areas of child support, broadband, and other areas of interest to the county, including Next-Gen 911 funding. There is significant information and analysis that has been done by the Wisconsin Counties Association. We'll send that out to the board members. So if you want to peruse the governor's budget as it is currently presented, you're able to do so. There is a lot of information in there, and a lot of information in regard to different program areas. The leadership team of Eau Claire County department heads will continue to monitor those funding sources that are relevant to their area of service, and will keep oversight committees informed, as well as administration and finance. So we'll continue to monitor and send out information to the board as it becomes available. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Dunning, I see your hand still raised. Did you wish to speak again? Is that a no? Thank you. Okay, I see no other hands raised. I had just started to inform you about the reports from the Finance Department, the 2 contingency fund reports, and the January vouchers over $10,000. You have those in your packet. Are there any questions regarding those? I hear none. Thank you. Next on our agenda is presentation of petitions, claims, and communications, beginning with a proclamation proclaiming March 21st to March 27th, 2021 Fair Housing Week. The chair looks for a motion.
Schneider.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Schneider moves.
Second, Bates.
Supervisor Bates seconds. Thank you. You have the proclamation in front of you. Any questions, concerns, corrections? We will do this by voice vote.
Supervisor Cronk with a question.
Oh, sorry, Supervisor Cronk.
Thank you. In the very first paragraph, and I don't have it up in front of me unless I go to my email, where it's talking about, I think is somebody pulling it up right now or putting it up on the screen, perhaps? One of the questions that I had in that very first paragraph, where it says making fair housing a reality for all, regardless of race, color, religion, national origin, age, sex, sexual orientation, ancestry, marital status, lawful source of income, handicap, or familial status. I'm wondering if we can add and amend it to also say conviction history, because we know in our community and in our state and nation, that's a huge housing barrier for people. And depending on people's views and stances, that may be a trigger for some. However, we know that upwards of 90%, 95% of people come home from prisons or jails, and that's a significantly huge barrier of housing. And so when we have folks that are unable to obtain housing, and insecurity, that definitely does not increase our community safety. So I'm wondering if we can amend that, and after handicap, comma, add conviction history.
Would you put that in the form of a motion, please?
Sure. Chair Smyer, before we do that, maybe I can help clarify this for Supervisor Cronk. If you read that language, it says the purpose of the federal fair housing law. And so this is a reference to the federal fair housing law. It's not a reference to local law. And the categories that are listed there, I believe those that are covered by the federal fair housing law. Understood. Thinking if we want to make the proclamation locally that we're proclaiming March 21st, March 27th, Fair Housing Week, and that's one of the issues that we face locally, where would be an appropriate place then to add it?
Tim?
Well, you would probably have to add a whole new whereas paragraph.
You wish to craft that now?
Schneider with a comment?
Supervisor Schneider. Go ahead.
I certainly agree with the intent of your comment, but I think in a way it would be ingenuous to include it in this resolution, and yet the laws that govern some of the housing specifically say that certain people with certain conviction histories can't live in certain housing units. So to say, yeah, we want non-restricted housing for all, and yet that's not what the laws say, I think in a way that's not a fair thing to do.
And Chair Smyer, I would also note that this is a proclamation, it's not a resolution. Just proclaiming it as a fair housing week. It's not supporting a position of the board. It's really saying that, consistent with what is being recommended from the Housing Authority, we're going to make a proclamation of fair housing week.
Okay. That leaves me with going back to Supervisor Cronk, because you do have the privilege of making an amendment if you wish. However, I think that Corp Counsel is correct that if you wish to do that, there would have to be another whereas paragraph. And I think you would have to take into account the comments that you've heard from other supervisors. So I come back to you because you have that privilege.
Thank you, and I'll withdraw. I understand that we're talking about the federal fair housing law and that we're not going to change that here. And I also take into consideration Supervisor Schneider's comment, but just in making the public comment that is something that we do need to consider locally. I understand this is a proclamation and we're talking about fair housing,
which also really adds to community safety, public safety. So I just want to make that comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other comment? Any other questions?
Yes,
Who is that?
Supervisor Maury.
Supervisor Maury, sorry.
I just looked it up, and there's, according to my research, which might be wrong, but there's 7 sources, and lawful source of income doesn't seem to be listed as one of the ones under the Federal Housing Act. And instead of handicap, it uses disability. And I don't know, if one is more appropriate than the other, but the 7 that are listed are race, color, religion, sex, disability, familial status, or national origin.
Tim?
Disability is a more modern term, but
That's
since
what I
this
thought.
came from somewhere, I just left it alone.
Is this yours, Schneider? Are you the author?
No.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not the author either.
Who is the author?
Georgia and the Housing Authority was the author.
Sorry, This is three voices. Yeah. Chair Smyer, this is Supervisor Leary. Please go I chair ahead. the Housing Commission.
Thank you.
And this proclamation is submitted annually by the Eau Claire County Housing Commission. It's true, it's kind of a rote thing, and I take Supervisor comments seriously. Unfortunately, I think it would be a problem to modify some of the things, just like Attorney Sullivan had mentioned, because this is based on the federal proclamation. I would ask everyone to look at the broad brush here. We're trying to encourage the residents and citizens of the county to have an open mind and try to do their fair share to have a fair housing opportunity for everyone. And so please support this. And then from the Housing Authority, it is not meant, hopefully, to be a contentious issue. Thank you.
I would also point out to supervisors that the statement is the purpose of the law is this, but it doesn't quote the law summarizing the purpose. And I thank you for your comment, Supervisor Leary. I'm going to go ahead with a voice vote. All those in favor of the proclamation of Fair Housing Week, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay.
Nay.
We have one nay, and I think that would be 27 aye. So the motion does pass. Thank you.
2 nays.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Nays.
Crump, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Sorry about that. Moving along, you have in your packet letters from the Town of Pleasant Valley and the Seymour Town Board. These are in your packet for your information. Next are 2 rezoning requests, one from the Town of Brunswick, the other from the Town of Pleasant Valley. These 2 items will come forward in the next county board. Next are first reading ordinances by committees. From the Committee on Planning and Development, notice that this is an ordinance, so it's first reading. Don, will you read the title of the file?
Ordinance to amend section 19.01.010 of the code. Adoption of the Eau Claire County, Wisconsin Comprehensive Plan.
This is first reading. This will go forward to our next county board meeting in March. Next item on our agenda, under reports of standing committees, commissions, and boards, from the Committee on Administration, Human Services, and Finance and Budget, from a joint committee meeting. Clerk McDonald, will you read the file, please?
Resolution authorizing a 2021 budget amendment to reinstate the 2020 annual employee step increase.
Okay, the 3 committees did meet jointly on Monday and did approve this I'm sorry, this resolution, but since it is a proposed ordinance, it will go to second reading in the next meeting. Is that correct, Tim?
No, this is a resolution.
Resolution.
It should be voted on tonight.
Okay, sorry about that.
Gatlin, I make a motion to move this forward.
Thank you. Moved by Supervisor Gatlin, second by
Supervisor Wilkie.
Supervisor Wilkie. Okay, speaking to it, I'm going to ask Supervisor Pagonis to address it. Supervisor Pagonis.
I'm here. Thank you, Chairman Smyer. As certainly all the people in the three committees will remember, because we just talked about it, but the rest of the county board, in July 2020, we suspended the step increase for employees. That was done, just as Norb was saying earlier, out of an abundance of caution. We were uncertain about revenue. We were uncertain about how things were going to play out. As we've moved forward, we would like to reinstate that, but the reinstatement would be as of March 14th, 2021. So out of the full year, realistically, staff would only be getting the 1 quarter. But the reason why it's important is that in July 2021, there will be another step increase. And by doing this in advance, the 2021 step increase will be with the employees at their previously expected wage. The funding for this, it's estimated to be about $450,000. During the budget session, we predicted sales tax for 2021 to be approximately $10 million. And we did that again, being cautious. We now have more confidence based on a variety of things that sales tax will continue to be strong. So this would include increasing the anticipated sales tax revenue by $450,000, so that sales tax would then be amended. Expected revenue in sales tax would be amended to $10,500,960. Because this is a budget amendment, it requires a 2/3 vote.
Yeah, thank you for the reminder. Okay, I will ask Supervisor Beckfield and or Administrator Schaaf if you wish to comment here.
I have a short comment.
Go ahead.
The COLA, my understanding, it was a question in the meeting. It did pass all 3 committees unanimously, if I remember correctly. But
Yes.
Stella, we did discuss that the COLA did go into effect. The cost of living increase, for those who don't know what that means, January. Is that correct still?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. That's all I have.
The cost of living increase went into effect January at 1.5%.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Supervisor Dunning, your hand is still up. Are you commenting?
Yeah, I took it down and then put it back up again when we were talking about the resolution on the housing. I was going to suggest that maybe the housing committee look at those amendments for next year, since they do it annually.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't see that hand go up. Don't confuse.
So noted.
Don't confuse the chair. Okay.
And
Thank you.
Chair
Supervisor
Smyer,
Pagonis. Yes.
yes, county ordinance requires that a budget amendment be based on a roll call vote. And so we would need to use our little electronic roll call voting that
I think we
rather than voice vote.
We can do a roll call vote by voice. I think that would be safe.
As long as it's a roll call vote, that's fine with me, however you want to do it.
That's how I want to do it. Okay. Any other comments, questions? I see none and I hear none. Clerk McDonald, will you do a roll call vote on this?
Gibson,
Yes.
McKinney,
Yes.
Knight,
Yes.
Pagonis,
Yes.
Zook,
Yes.
Chilson,
Yes.
Stelgis,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Henning,
Yes.
Bates,
Yes.
Russell,
Yes.
Gatlin,
Yes.
Smyer,
Yes.
Hambook Boyle,
Yes.
Neiman,
Yes.
Dunning, Dunning, Wilkie, Anderson,
Yes.
Beckfield, Supervisor Beckfield,
Yes.
Schneider. Did she say yes? Supervisor
Yes.
Schneider? Okay, thank you. Leary,
Yes.
DeLuca,
Yes.
Jansen,
Yes.
Jansen,
Yes.
thank you. Schaffnagel,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Kronk,
Yes.
and Christofferson.
Yes.
We have 28 yeses, one absent.
Hanson just voted. I started late. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. I did not know you were here. Okay.
Is that 29, Sue?
29.
That is unanimous. Thank you. The next is from the Committee on Administration, File 108.
All right. A resolution reauthorization of self-insurance.
A motion. Sorry.
Motion by Leary.
Motion by Leary. Second.
Second by Supervisor Anderson.
Second by Supervisor Anderson. Thank you. Questions or comments? Oh, I'm sorry. Explanation first. I will ask
I can
Administrator.
do that.
I'm sorry, Supervisor Bates. Go ahead.
Thank you. Every 3 years, the county is required to indicate that it intends to remain self-insured for the workman's compensation. And the state, because we are a part of a governmental body, allows us to participate in this. This particular move would save the county about $100,000 a year, and sometimes up to 200,000. And so you are self-insured instead of going through a broker. The cost of workers' compensation and insurance in Eau Claire County is charged back to departments. The fiscal impact of this is about $577,000, and your agenda shows on the fiscal impact exactly how that is divided as far as the cost is concerned. I urge your support.
Thank you. We have available also Sonia Wienhoutz, our risk manager. Did you wish to add anything? Sonia.
Sorry, I couldn't get it to unmute. The only thing that I would ask is that we do continue to stay self-insured for workers' comp, because it truly does save us money and allows us to manage our costs very closely and within control. And so it's definitely a good opportunity for the county as a cost savings.
Thank you. I see no hands raised. I hear no voices regarding this. I believe we can do this by a voice vote, by majority vote. Am I correct? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All those persons in favor of reauthorization of self-insurance, file 108, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Thank you. All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next item is from the Committee on Human Resources, file number 110.
Resolution authorizing to abolish one full FTE, Administrative Associate 3, and to create one full FTE, Administrative Associate 4.
Motion?
Motion to approve.
Hamburg Boyle, moving. Second.
Gunning,
Dunning, second. Thank you. Explanation.
Leary.
Sorry. Supervisor Beckfield?
Yes, there are three things I want to say, and I believe Tina is here, and I'll give her a chance in a second. But first thing is the fiscal impact was, as you can see in the report in 21, is $1,336 with this change. In 22, it would be $1,963. Also want you to know that it was a unanimous vote from the Human Resources team. And there is some additional income coming in that wasn't expected from a couple of vendors, one of which is Zillow, which also pays a fee to the county for giving that information. And it's actually helping to offset the cost, but gives a little additional work. Tina, are you there? Our Register of Deeds?
Yes, I'm here.
Take it from here. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
So the additional revenue that Mr. Beckfield was talking about is in November, we signed a contract with the real estate company Zillow. And so they are requesting our documents, copies of our documents that we record on a daily basis. And based off of December and January numbers, it's anywhere from $1,200 to $1,000 per month additional revenue that was not budgeted because the contract was signed in November. So it'd be approximately an additional $12,000 of revenue per year. And so part of that money will be used to this position change. And then the rest would just be additional revenue to the department. And I'm hoping that you will support this change in position because we did see quite a difference, increased recordings this year, and the office has just been a lot busier. And so the position has just changed in duties. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or discussion? I see no hands raised. I hear no voices. Supervisors, we are now voting on file 110. All those in favor of file number 110, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next, from the Committee on Planning and Development, file number 105. This takes a little explanation. Even though the applicant has withdrawn the application, this was on our agenda. My intention as chair is to read out the file number, the title, and then declare the motion to be empty because the application has been withdrawn. So Clerk McDonald, would you simply read the title of file number 105?
Ordinance amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Washington.
Okay, so this is now an empty motion, and we will move on. Next is file 101.
Ordinance amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town
of Brunswick. Okay. Motion.
Motion by Leary.
Motion by Supervisor Leary. Second.
Beckfield, second.
Second by Supervisor Beckfield. Explanation, Supervisor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair Smeyer. This is to rezone 30.8 acres from AP to A2 agriculture. district to divide the existing home and surrounding properties to allow the creation of 2 additional agriculture residential lots. This meets the land use plans. Eau Claire County's future land use map includes this property in the rural lands planning, and the town of Brunswick's future land use map includes the property in their rural preservation planning area. Staff's conclusions were they find that the proposed rezoning request substantially conforms with the Eau Claire County's comprehensive plan also. The town of Brunswick, they met on January 11th and recommended approval 3-0. Our planning and development committee, we held a public hearing on January 26th and we voted 5-0 in favor.
Thank you. Questions or discussion? See no hands raised. I hear no voices. Supervisors, we will now vote on file number 101. All those in favor of file number 101, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Thank you. All those opposed by nay. The ayes have it. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next is file 102.
Ordinance amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Lincoln.
Motion.
Field.
Motion by Supervisor Beckfield. Second.
Coffee seconds.
Second by Supervisor Coffey. Explanation. Supervisor Gibson again.
Okay, this one is to rezone 73.45 acres from AP agriculture to A3 agriculture district to allow the applicant and his son to divide the property into 2 lots to construct a single family residence on each of the lots. As far as the land use plans, Eau Claire County's future land use map includes this property in the rural lands planning area, and the town of Lincoln's future land use map also includes this property in the rural preservation planning area. Staff's conclusions were that finds that the proposed rezoning request substantially conforms with the Eau Claire County comprehensive plan also. The town of Lincoln held their public hearing on January 12th and recommended approval 3-0. Planning and Development, we held the public hearing on January 26th and we voted 5-0 in favor.
Thank you. Questions or discussion?
Henning moves approval.
Oh, we have a motion already. Supervisor Henning, thank you. We're going to proceed to a vote. Is there any other discussion? Okay, supervisors, we're voting file number 102. All those in favor of file 102, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next is file 104.
Ordinance amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Seymour.
I don't think this is an ordinance, right?
The paperwork I have say ordinance.
Technically, is this an ordinance?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. But we vote on
it. It is, but because it's comes from planning and development and it's a rezoning, it comes in for action at this point.
Thank you. My apologies, clerk. Okay. Explanation. Supervisor Gibson again.
Do we need the motion?
I thought we had the motion. Did I not? I did not take the motion.
I think we did on this.
Not yet.
Oh, sorry. Motion.
Gatlin, I make a motion.
Schraufnagel moves. Who was the second?
Gatlin.
Gatlin is the second. My apologies to Supervisor Henning. Did I mistake myself there?
That's okay.
That's all right. It's the second time you've forgiven me today, Supervisor Henning. Okay, thank you. So we have the motion. We have it moved and seconded. Explanation, Supervisor Gibson again.
All right. This is to rezone 5 acres of land from AP district to A2 agriculture district to allow the property owners to sell the farm to one of their children and construct a residence on the 5-acre property to allow the owners to continue assisting with the farming operations. The land use plans, Eau Claire County and the town of Seymour's future land maps both include the property as rural land planning area. Staff's conclusions and recommendations were that they find the proposed rezoning district substantially conforms with the Eau Claire County's comprehensive plan. The town of Seymour held their public hearing on December 14th and recommended approval 3-0. Eau Claire County's planning and development, we held a public hearing on this on February 9th and we voted 5-0 in favor.
Thank you. Questions or discussion? I see no hands raised. There are no voices. Supervisors, we are voting on file 104. All those in favor of file 104, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next is file 106.
One more. Ordinance amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Brunswick.
Motion.
Beckfield.
Motion.
Beckfield.
Second, Bates.
Supervisor Beckfield moves and Supervisor Bates seconds. Explanation. Finally, last time. Supervisor Gibson.
Okay, this is to rezone 40 acres of land from AP to A1 district to allow the applicant to construct a single-family residence without the agriculture income restrictions associated with the AP districts. The land use plans, Eau Claire County's land use map indicates the property in the rural lands planning area, and the town of Brunswick's future land use map includes the property in the rural preservation planning area. Staff's conclusions were staff finds proposed rezoning request substantially conforms with the Eau Claire County's comprehensive plan. The town of Brunswick, they held their public meeting on January 12th, voted 3-0. Eau Claire County's planning and development, we conducted our public hearing on February 9th and voted 5-0 in favor.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Question or discussion? I see no hands raised. I hear no voices. Supervisors, we are voting on file 106. All in favor of file 106, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed by nay. The ayes have it. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next, from the Committee on Finance and Budget, file 115.
A resolution, an initial resolution authorizing the borrowing of not to exceed $24,350,000 and providing for the issuance and sale of general obligation highway facility bonds therefore.
Motion.
Henning moves.
Moved by Henning. Second.
Second by Wilkie.
Second by Supervisor Wilkie. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure that it needs much more of an explanation. This is the first of 2 initial resolutions that we're offering tonight for the purposes of borrowing during 2021. This particular one is specific to the highway facility. We need a 3/4, and it needs to be a roll call vote.
Thank you. Questions, discussion? I see no hands raised. I hear no voices. Supervisors?
Can I just say one thing, please?
Sure.
Just want to explain why it's an initial resolution, because these always come in 2 parts. So as the initial resolution, this is telling our borrowing, our agents, that they can go out and get bids. So that's why it's the initial resolution. It will come back to us when the bids come in and then we vote on it. So just to explain what initial resolution means.
Thanks for the clarification. Supervisors, we are voting on file number 115. We are doing this by roll call vote, and 3/4 required. Supervisor Pagonis?
Yes, 22.
22.
3/4 of the member-elect. So
Thank
that
you.
means even if
Total.
people were absent, we'd count them.
Thank you. Supervisor, sorry. Clerk, would you do the roll call on this, please?
Okay. Gibson,
Aye.
McKinney,
Aye.
Knight,
Yes.
Pagonis,
Aye.
Pagonis,
Aye.
Anton, Anton,
Yes.
thank you. Zook,
Yes.
Chilson,
Yes.
Stelgis,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Henning,
Yes.
Bates,
Yes.
Russell,
Yes.
Gatlin,
Yes.
Smyer,
Yes.
Hambuck Boyle,
Yes.
Hambuck Boyle,
Yes.
Said yes.
Neiman,
Yes.
Dunning,
Yes.
Dunning, thank you. Wilkie, Wilkie,
He
Yes.
said yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
Anderson,
Yes.
Beckfield, Beckfield,
You're muted, Mark.
Yes.
thank you. Schneider,
Yes.
Leary,
Yes.
DeLuca,
Yes.
Jansen,
Yes.
Schaffnagel,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Kronk,
Yes.
Christofferson.
Yes.
It's 29.
29. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next is file 116.
A resolution, initial resolution authorizing the borrowing of not to exceed $7,405,000 and providing for the issuance and sale of general obligation promissory note therefore.
Motion?
Supervisor Wilkie moves.
Supervisor Wilkie moves. Second? Second?
By Leary.
Supervisor Leary seconds. Thank you. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry,
So-
go slow there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you all heard Sean say earlier that this is our regular annual borrow. In the past, we used to wait until pretty far into the year, summer, fall, before we did this borrow. And the last 2 years, we've moved it up. We're moving it up even further this year because we want to take advantage of, we're going to have a Moody's rating done for a refunding that we're doing and for the highway. So we're taking advantage of that Moody's rating and doing both of the borrows at the same time. The issue we've talked about before, that it would not to, before previous years, we tried to keep it at 9 million or less, and that was so we could be bank qualified. This year, because of the highway, we're out of that, so we're not bank qualified. But this 7,405,000 is a lower number than we normally see because some of the highway related things, yes, partially the wheel tax, and yes, partially that it would be moved into the highway building, some of the repairs that we might have otherwise done. So I encourage approval of this. There are a lot of things that went into this into this borrowing, and it's all in your capital section in your budget that I'm sure all of you have memorized. And so if you need a reference, that's where you go. I can give you the page number if you'd like. We need a roll call vote, 3/4 approval.
Thank you. No more questions? I see no hands raised. I hear no voices. Supervisors, we are voting on file 116. All those in favor of file 116?
Needs
A roll call.
A roll call.
I caught myself in that one, Supervisor. Clerk McDonald, please call the roll.
All right, Gibson,
Yes.
McKinney,
Yes.
Knight,
Yes.
Pagonis,
Yes.
Pagonis,
Yes.
Anton, Supervisor Anton?
He said yes.
Okay, thank you. Zook,
Yes.
Chilson,
Yes.
Stelgis,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Henning,
Yes.
Bates,
Yes.
Russell,
Yes.
Gatlin,
Yes.
Smyer,
Yes.
Hambuck Boyle,
Yes.
Yes.
Dunning,
Yes.
Wilkie,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Beckfield,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
Leary,
Yes.
DeLuca,
Yes. Yes.
Jansen,
Yes. I don't know why.
Okay, thank you. Troffnagel,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Kronk,
Yes.
and Christofferson.
Yes.
We have 29 yeses.
Thank you. It is unanimous. Next is file 109.
A resolution authorizing the sale of tax deed property to the Village of Fairchild for $2,125.08. Directing Corp Counsel to prepare a quitclaim deed on the described property. Directing the county clerk to execute said quitclaim deed on behalf of Eau Claire County.
Motion.
Gibson moves.
Dunning seconds.
Who was the first who moved?
Gibson.
Oh, Gibson. Moved by Supervisor Gibson, second by Supervisor Dunning. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you. This is going to be an easy one. This is a very small parcel of property in the Village of Fairchild that the county took on tax deed sale. State statute requires that if the municipality wishes to, they could buy it back. So this is the Village of Fairchild has asked for it. The amount that is being, the purchase price is the amount to recover the expenses that we put into it. So $2,125.08.
And this requires 20 votes or 2/3. Am I correct?
No, I think it's a simple majority.
Is it? Can't let me have one tonight.
Well,
It's a simple majority.
I'm just joking. Sorry.
sorry.
It's late and I'm getting punchy here. Sorry. Okay, we can do this by voice vote then.
Yes.
All those in
Right.
favor of file 109, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next is file 111.
A resolution authorizing the 2020 carry forward of funds from the 2020 budget into the 2021 budget and reallocating capital projects funds for highway.
Motion.
Motion to approve Bates.
Bates moves. Second.
Gatlin, second.
Supervisor Gatlin seconds. Thank you. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Yes, and I'll be quick on this. I'm sure that's why you put finance and budget last, is to discourage all the questions, right?
No, it's because I'm losing my grip and I need your help.
So we have a policy on the books called a carry forward policy that under certain circumstances, a department could push unused funds into the following year. To respond to Supervisor DeLuca's question, these were funds that were borrowed during 2020. It was about 700,000 that was borrowed, and not all of it was used. It was primarily borrowed for repairs to the highway building. When we made the decision to build a new highway building, we decided not to go through with all the repairs. So what this is to carry forward the bond fund from 2020 to 2021, and the uses are right in the middle of the resolution. It's a variety of an improvement of the radio communications, possible purchase of a parcel adjacent to the parcel where the highway facility will be built, and then some other work in the Augusta shop and small things. So this would require a 2/3 vote because it is a budget amendment, and because it would fall under the segment of under 2.04040, it would need to be by a roll call vote. But I'll answer questions if Supervisor DeLuca has questions or anyone else.
Are there any questions or is there any discussion?
This is Coffee, and I just have one question about the HAVEX system. We do have to replace that, I assume, because of safety for employees, and it can't wait. Is that true?
I don't have an answer to that, but I think that Highway Commissioner was on the call. He could possibly answer that.
Commissioner Johnson, are you available?
Yes, I am.
Can you respond?
Yes, so the HVAC units in Augusta are over 20 years old and at the end of their service life and need to be replaced for air handling in the shop.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a safety issue, right, John?
Yeah, it's basically air quality. So there's air handling units and the heater. So that's the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system at that shop, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor DeLuca.
So I asked earlier, were we able to consider this money toward the highway facility to decrease the amount we had to borrow? Or is it because it's already been allocated, but we're reallocating it for other things anyway? I just was wondering, did we even consider using this as money to decrease our borrowing for the highway facility?
Well, that would be Supervisor Pagonis, I think.
Yeah, well, Supervisor DeLuca, I think it's a great question, and frankly, it did not come up when we started approaching the highway building. We were looking at the full amount. When we looked at the carry forward, we identified borrowing from 2020 that hadn't been used, and there were opportunities where we hadn't identified previously. I mean, you make a very good point, but for example, that land parcel purchase was a fairly recent development that it's with the possibility that the Meals on Wheels kitchen will be part of the highway facility. And so it's just, we're kind of enthusiastic about that as a possibility. So these are actually new. I don't know that at any point we sat down and said, well, we've got 500,000 here, let's change the highway borrowing to, 23,700,000 instead of 24 million. So I guess frankly, we probably did not consider it in the way you've asked the question.
Other question, discussion? I see none. Supervisors, we are voting on file 111.
It needs
You
to
have
be
to
a
do
roll
this
call
roll call.
vote with 2/3.
2/3. I did pay attention that time. Thank you. Donald.
Gibson,
Yes.
McKinney,
Yes.
Knight,
You're muted, Joe.
Aye.
That was a yes, Sue.
Pagonis,
Yes.
Anton, Supervisor Anton?
Said yes, I believe.
Thank you. Zook,
Yes.
Chilson,
Yes.
Stelgis,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Henning,
Yes.
Bates,
Yes.
Russell,
Yes.
Gatlin,
Yes.
Smyer,
Yes.
Hambuck Boyle,
Yes.
Neiman,
Yes.
Dunning,
Yes.
Wilkie,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Beckfield,
Yes.
Schneider, Leary,
Yes.
DeLuca,
Yes.
Jansen,
Yes.
Schroffnagel,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Kronk,
Yes.
Christofferson.
Yes.
29.
The motion passes. Thank you. Supervisors, we've reached the end of our agenda. Thank you for your patience and perseverance this evening. We are now adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County.